we've been in a series called The Waiting Game, and again, we've talked about this, like, right? No one likes to wait. And in the first week, if you weren't here, we talked about this. One of the reasons that we have such a hard time waiting, particularly when it comes to God, but just waiting in general, is our appetites. That our appetites always scream now and never later. I mean, we always want what we want, and we want it when we want it. Then in week 2, we looked at a different aspect of the waiting game, that what are we supposed to do while we're waiting on God to answer? We've all been there, right? Like we've been waiting on God to give us an answer to a prayer or whatever it is in our life. And so what are we supposed to do? That was week 2. And then last week we talked about, well, what is God doing? Like while we're waiting, what is God doing? Does he not care? Is he sitting up there? Is he ignorant of what's going on in our life? And that's not true at all. God is while we're waiting, God is working. And so if you want to go back and listen to those messages, you can find them on our YouTube page. You can find them on our website. You can find them there. So today I want us to look at something. We're going to look again at the life of Joseph. And I want us to just, before we take communion, I want us to begin to ask this question. And here's the question I sort of want to open up with. And this is what we're going to tackle. And this is something that you all need to think very deeply on. We all do. What is it that you really want God to do for you? Because we enter these seasons of waiting, we're usually waiting on God to do something. What is it that you really want God to do for you? Because if we're being honest, a lot of the times when we're waiting on God to do the things that we say we want God to do for us, really those things are conflicting. We have conflicting wants that are going on in our life simultaneously. A lot of times we want God to deliver us from struggles and strains, but then we know that James would say, rejoice when you face trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. That we're asking God to remove something that he's placed in our life for a specific purpose. Sometimes we want God to deliver us from the struggle of one situation, but in doing so, he would actually create another problem in another situation. I mean, if you think about it from the context of a parent, I mean, sometimes your kids are going to go through some difficulties. You know, our kids, when they go to school, they're going to have educational difficulties, right? I mean, like you're going to go to class and some of the academics that they're going to have a hard time with math, or they're going to have a hard time with science or history or whatever it is. Our kids are going to struggle, but you know, the struggle is part of their growth. Can you push through the academic strain, and can you still achieve what you need to achieve and do what you need to do? Sometimes our kids are going to go through particularly when they get middle school, high school, they're going to go through relational strains. And if we jump in as parents and fix everything for them, they never learn how to work through some of those things. So they're going to go through, and God sees us the same way. There's going to be some struggles and strains in our life that God is going to have us go through. And if he removes some of those, so while we're waiting, we're going, okay, God, if you would just remove this from me, he's going, if I remove that from you, you don't grow here. And so what do you want God to really do for you? Because if you really want God's plan to unfold in your life, then you have to be willing to embrace some of the strains and the struggle that come with his plan. And this is Joseph's story. How many of you in here, just quickly by a show of hands, how many of you in here, let's say you relatively enjoy a jigsaw puzzle? Anybody? I like them. I don't like go out and buy them. Like I'm not going, like if somebody says, hey, what do you want for Christmas? I don't usually go, a great jigsaw puzzle would be fantastic. I don't do that. But I do enjoy them. Like we have some friends of ours that have a cabin in Pine Mountain, and we have vacationed together with them on numerous occasions. Some of you have met Misty and Ryan. We go up to their family's cabin occasionally, and we've taken some staff retreats there. And when we go, they have this shelf, and over on their bookshelf that's kind of tucked off in the corner, there's card games, there's board games, and then there's boxes of jigsaw puzzles that they have bought. And a lot of times what we'll do is we may take one with us. And when we get up there, whether it's just as friends or whether it's as the church staff, we'll just dump the whole box on the table, and we begin the process of putting it together, right? Like we're going to put this jigsaw puzzle together. And, there's some things that when we start putting jigsaw puzzles together, there's things that you have to understand about the jigsaw puzzle. And so what we usually do is once it's on the table, people begin to do. So when you start a jigsaw puzzle, where do you start? What do you find first? Anybody? The edges, right? You got to find the edges because those are the easiest ones to find. And so then you begin to build the edges. And what we'll do is we'll find those and we'll start putting the edges together. And then finally you get the edges done. And then what we'll do from that point on is we'll take the pieces and you can look at the colors, right? You can look at the colors and you can kind of look at the box top and you can go, okay, well, these kind of seem to be over here in the top right corner. And then these are going to be over here in the bottom left corner. And you begin to kind of put piles together that look like they go together. And then when people come and sit down at the table, several people will come and they'll grab pieces and they'll start just putting pieces together. And then suddenly you're working from the outside and you're working in towards the middle and it gets exciting. But there's always a point. If you've ever put one together, like if you put jigsaw puzzles together, that's like a 10-piece jigsaw puzzle, congratulations. Those are awesome, but those are not really challenging, right? It's the ones that are like thousands of pieces. And you get those jigsaw puzzles, and there's those moments that you've stared at that thing forever. And you get stuck, and you can't find the piece. And you even start going cross-eyed a little bit, looking for the piece, and they all start looking the same after a while. And you're like, man, I cannot find this one piece and this one piece until I find it. I can't move forward. And what happens at the cabin is we'll go and whoever, they'll go and sit down, they'll start working, and then some people will start trickling over, and we'll work some more. And then you get to that point where you're just stuck. And then we kind of go, okay, let's take a break. Let's just walk away and we'll go do something else. And maybe a couple hours later, we'll make our way back to the table and we'll start working on the jigsaw puzzle again. There's a couple of things that, as you're working on the jigsaw puzzle, there's two mistakes that you don't want to make, right? The two mistakes that you really don't want to make is you want to be careful that you don't lose a piece. That will really increase the frustration in your life, right? I remember the last time we were at the cabin, we had a jigsaw puzzle piece that had fallen on the floor, and we'd been looking for that piece, it seemed like, for 2 hours. And finally we got up and we walked away, and later on somebody walked back to the table and they looked, and on the floor there was a piece, and it was the piece that everybody had been looking for forever, the last round. And there's a second thing that you really don't want to do. There's a mistake that you don't want to make. It would be a really bad idea to lose the box top, wouldn't it? I mean, could you imagine somebody going, hey, I got a great present for you. It's a 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, and we don't have really the box top for it, but we thought you'd enjoy it. Like, I just want to punch you in the face right now. That's just what I want to do. Right? Like, it would be extremely frustrating, right? It would be extremely difficult. Why? You don't want to lose the box top because the box top is the key to knowing what this whole thing's going to look like when it's done. And if you get one of those that has a lot of detail in it, I remember one of the pieces that we lost last time we were working together as a staff, there was a sailboat, and there was a little piece of the sailboat that was missing, and it had fallen on the ground. And it was like, without that piece, like, you couldn't really finish the sailboat, which helped you get to the next section. And so it gets really frustrating if you lose a piece, but you really don't want to lose the box top either, because without the box top, you wouldn't know what the piece is that you're missing. Now, with that said, it's the box top principle that helped Joseph get through all of the strains and struggles that he went through in his life. And what do I mean by that? It's this idea of God's plan, God's greater plan, God's big plan. See, when we're in the waiting game, what becomes difficult is the unknown. But we may not know what every little detail is going to be. We may not know what the next step is going to be because we haven't gotten that far into the puzzle yet. But if we think about our life and we think about God's plan for our life, that He has the big picture and He knows the big picture, and that if we could see the big picture, that we would be able to have a little bit more confidence when we can't find all the pieces and make them fit together perfectly. That this is Joseph's story. I mean, that's Joseph. He didn't know how everything was going to transpire. I mean, one day you're a 17-year-old boy that your brothers hate. The next day you're a 17-year-old boy that your brothers hated enough to sell into slavery. And you're not living at home anymore, and you're separated from your family, and your father thinks you're dead, and you don't even know if you'll ever see them again. So how do you endure something like that? And how do you endure something when, you're in a house of an Egyptian officer, and you're his slave, you're his guy, you're working around the house, and he's entrusted you with a lot of stuff that we're going to look at here in a second. But what do you do when you're going, okay, I don't know how this plays out. I don't know where this is going. I don't know how this all ends. I don't know if it ends well or if it ends really badly. I just don't know. And so in the waiting game, while you're waiting on God, it's important, it's vital that you and I have the big picture principle, if you will, of what God is up to and what God is trying to do. And I want to show you how this is important and vital in Joseph's life. Then I'm going to tell you or talk to you for a second about how we can understand what the box top principle is for our life. So Joseph waited well because he had unshakable confidence in God's plan. We've read through this, we've talked about it already, that Joseph had a dream. And it wasn't a dream like you and I have, where we're being chased by dogs and our feet get stuck in mud and we can't run anymore. I mean, this is a big dream, like an actual crystal clear picture vision for Joseph's life of what was going to play out. Now, not every detail, but here's what he knew. He knew because of the dream that God had given him. He had this dream that one day all of the sheaves of his family were going to bow down to him. And it might sound arrogant for him to share that, but he did. And he said, I just want to tell you, I've had this dream and this is how this thing plays out. And because he believed that it was from God and believed in the faithfulness and the truthfulness of what God had given him, he could then step confidently into every unknown because God had given him a crystal clear picture. He doesn't give you the detail, Joseph, of how everything is going to happen, but the end picture, the box top, is going to look like this when it's all done. In the waiting game, it often becomes difficult to understand all of the pieces of the puzzle properly because we don't understand them in context. Sometimes it can be tempting to put the wrong places in the wrong place simply because it seems to fit and it helps you make progress. See, in our culture, we're so progress driven. I'm okay if I don't know the answers, but if we're moving somewhere and everything seems to be progressing, then we can be happy about it. And in the illustration of the puzzle, there have been times that I've sat down and like, okay, this next piece looks like this, and I'll put a piece in there, and it's like, I think this fits here. But it doesn't fit perfectly, like the rounded side. I had to kind of shove in there a little bit. I'm trying to force it into the puzzle because I just want it to fit. And if I can make this thing fit, it kind of looks like it fits. I don't care that it's a dog and a dog's face and a cat's body. I want to make it fit because it's making me feel good about progress. And see, that's how we live our life sometimes. We try to take all these pieces that are out there and we try to force them into places and spaces that they're not meant to be, just so we can feel like we're making progress. And if you will, look with me at Genesis 39 and starting in verse 6. All right, so Potiphar is Joseph's master, if you will. He's an officer in Pharaoh's guard. He owns the house that has been sold, that Joseph has been sold into slavery into. And there's this account that we're going to see here real quick of Joseph and Potiphar's wife. And so verse 6 says, so he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. That means Potiphar. He leaves all that he has in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. So in other words, what it's saying is Joseph was so blessed by God. Everything that Joseph did, he did with excellence. Potiphar knew that Joseph was trustworthy. Potiphar knew that Joseph was blessed and everything that he was doing was going well. So Potiphar said, you know what? Like, man, you're doing such a great job. I'm going to leave you in charge of my entire household. And at the end of verse 6, when it said, so he had no concern about anything but the food he ate, and basically what it means is Potiphar's going, really my only concern now, Joseph, because you're doing such a good job? Because you're doing such a good job, I'm not worried about my finances. I'm not worried about whether the work around the house is going to get done. I'm not worried about my wife. I'm not worried about my taxes, my money. I'm not worried about anything. Joseph, you got it. The only thing that I'm going to concern myself with is what am I going to eat for dinner? That's basically what that's saying. Wouldn't it be great if the only thing that you had to worry about in your life is choosing what your next meal would be? This is Potiphar. Potiphar's only concern concerning his household is what am I going to eat? Verse 7. Well, I guess the rest of verse 6. Now Joseph was what? Handsome in form and appearance. Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Verse 7. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as he spoke to Joseph day after day, or as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her to lie beside her or to be with her. Now, I want to just sort of unpack these, and Holly, we may go back through verses. Again, he trusted Joseph so much that Potiphar had to do nothing. He had to pay attention to nothing. Except, and including, he didn't have to take care of anything in his house, including his wife. One commentary says that about this passage of Scripture, and it pointed this out, and I think it's appropriately so. It pointed out how easy it would have been for Joseph to have played this part, put this piece in the puzzle wrongly. Okay? I want to paint a picture for us real quick. Joseph was, can we go back to verse 7, I think it is, or 6, the end of verse 6? Yeah, there we go. Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Like, I don't know who the guy is for you. Like, I don't know who that picture of handsome is. I don't know if it's Brad Pitt or who it is. So picture Brad Pitt's face maybe with Dwayne Johnson's body. I don't know. Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. So I'm imagining Joseph, really good-looking guy, attractive. And he's just like cut up. He's chiseled. He's got like the perfect, athletic type body. And so here's Joseph living in Potiphar's house. And what does Scripture inform us? Or what Scripture does not inform us, but we might conclude is that Potiphar's wife, she was probably a very attractive lady. Well, how can we pull that? Well, Potiphar was in Egypt, most powerful place on the planet at the time. He was an officer for Pharaoh's army, which meant he had power, he had prestige, he probably had plenty of money. And so a person like that in that day would have pretty much had the pick of whoever he wanted as a wife. I mean, he probably had Miss Egypt, 1890 BC. I don't know, right? Like that's his wife. But Potiphar probably had a very attractive wife. He could have had a pick of any woman that he wanted in Egypt. So let me recite a few of the ingredients that we have here. A young and handsome man that has had a rough go of it in life. He's been given a vision by God, but during, as the vision plays out, as all the puzzle pieces begin to take shape, for him, the way he experiences it is, hey, God gave me a vision for my life, and I shared it with people, and they hated me for it. And then because they hated me for it, they sold me into slavery. And now I'm in this guy's house, and I'm working for him instead of carrying out or fulfilling possibly what I feel like God has called me to do. I'm certainly not in the place that I thought I would be. Now, he could have been mad with God. You ever been mad with God? You ever been angry? You ever been upset because things in your life just didn't play out right? And sometimes we look around, we make the mistake of looking around at other people, and we go, God, look at how they live their life. And then we get self-righteous. They're not as good as I am. They don't go to church as much as I do. They don't give to the church. They don't serve in the church. They don't do all this stuff. And we look at their life and we go, man, they're so blessed. And we use that word wrongly. Just because people have money and material things doesn't mean they're blessed. We look at these things and then it's like, okay, so Joseph could have been bitter at God because God didn't do or wasn't doing, it would seem or appear, that he's fulfilling the vision that he gave to Joseph. So Joseph could have been angry. God, like, where are you at? You gave me this vision. I just simply shared it with people and they turned on me. So he could have been mad at God. He could have said to himself that you're going to allow all this pain in my life. So if you're going to allow all this pain in my life, then why am I living for you? I might as well just go and do what I want to do. If you're allowing all this pain, if you're allowing all this bad, then how can you be good? And if you're not good, then why should I serve you? That could have been his position. He could have been. Here's another thing about where Joseph was at. He could have been looking for any opportunity to find comfort. I don't know about you, but when I'm in pain, I just want to find some comfort. If I'm hungry, I'm looking for food. If I have hunger pains, I'm going to find something to eat. If I'm having physical pain, like if I got a headache, I go get a Tylenol. I take a Tylenol to ease my headache. If I've got an injury and I got swelling, I'm looking for some ibuprofen. If I've got other stuff going on, I'm going to the doctor because why? I just want you to stop the pain. And Joseph probably in that moment, if he's like me and you, Joseph is probably, he could have been angry with God and he could have just said, you know what, I just want to find something that will make life feel good again. Handsome guy. In a difficult situation, could have been angry at God. Second ingredient that's in this story, a more than likely beautiful woman who is being neglected by her career-focused husband. It's said that pretty much the only thing in his whole house that he concerned himself with is what he's going to eat. So she sees a handsome man that's at home taking care of everything that entails taking care of a house. She sees him sweating, right? He probably at times, Joseph probably has to take his shirt off to work on some of the stuff, you know. She has to grab a fan and start fanning herself. And she sees this and he's taking care of it. He's probably a very nice guy, you know. There's some reason that Potiphar looked at him and said, hey, I'm going to entrust you with my entire house. And so she sees all this. And she has a desire for intimacy that her husband was supposed to fulfill, but yet most likely not. And so she says to Joseph, if we jump down, she says to Joseph what? In verse 7, lie with me. Now, handsome man, probably attractive woman. He's in a bad spot, looking for comfort. She is looking to be comforted too in the arms of another man. He's not too much older than 17 at the time. Man, y'all remember what it was like to be 17? And a beautiful woman says, hey, I want you to come lie with me. Now, what is the average bitter, selfish person do in that moment? You know what most men would do, most young men would do that age? I'm going to take this piece of the puzzle that I think goes somewhere else, and I'm just going to make this thing fit. I'm going to do what I want to do because I just need some comfort. I mean, goodness, of all the things that I've been through, I deserve a little bit of a reward. I mean, we read it in English. She said it in Egyptian. Moses recorded it in Hebrew, but that's pretty straightforward. When a woman just looks at him and says, lie with me. No interpretation needed. His brothers had severed his family connection. He's a lonely stranger in a strange land. He has zero spiritual encouragement or accountability in this moment. He's a slave with few pleasures, if any. And Joseph was a red-blooded young man who's with normal desires, and there's a stunning woman that just solicited him with an opportunity that most men in his situation would have leapt at. But in the same way her proposition was straightforward to Joseph, look at how he responds to her. But he what? He refused and said to his master's wife, behold, because of my master, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in this house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. Look at verse 9. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he nor has he kept back anything from me except you because you are his wife. How then can I do this? How can I do this great wickedness and what? Sin against God. And what does he mean when he says sin against God? Yes, there is a God, a very real God that Joseph is saying that I am not going to sin against him. But when he says sin against God, he is also meaning in the context of that, like, right, great commandment or 10 commandments. Do not commit adultery. Which he didn't have that yet, but he knew that there was a way that he's supposed to live. And he says, I'm not going to sin against God. In other words, I'm not going to sin against God's plan for my life. I've seen the box top. That piece doesn't go in there. And so he says, no, I'm not going to sin against God. So why was he able to do that in spite of all of the difficulties that he was facing? How is Joseph able to, in the middle of the waiting game, how is it that Joseph is able to do this? It's because Joseph still had the box top, and he knew that this piece for him did not fit into God's plan. What about you? Do you find yourself at a place in your life where you're being tempted to make decisions that you know compromise your character or integrity? Are you currently being tempted because perhaps you've lost sight of the box top that God gave you? I mean, listen, is the best way I know how to say it, the way that the world works. And it's because God designed it that way. I've said it before, you can get up on top of this building, get on top of that dome and jump off and believe that you're not going to fall, but it's going to fall. Why? Because God created this thing called gravity, and it just happens to work every single time. There is a way that the world works, and God designed it. God created the box top. So are you currently being tempted because perhaps you've lost sight of the box top that God gave you? Has the vision that God gave you for your life, has it faded into the background of the cares of the world? See, there are times in life when life feels like all the pieces have been dumped out onto the table, and it feels chaotic, and it looks scattered, and it gets stressful, and it gets frustrating. And we get to these places in life where when it's like that, and we go, like I'm just starting from scratch. I feel like I'm just starting over, and you're not starting over. You're just kind of picking up where you left off. Like everything that you do, everything that we do as far as our pursuit of God, it's all about just, God, show me the box top. Remind me of what you said my life is to be about. And it feels chaotic as we try to put the pieces back together, and then you hit these places, right, where you feel stuck, just like we do with the puzzle. And we walk away. So we get to the places in the puzzle and we walk away. We go, I'm just so frustrated with this right now. Like I'm tired of looking at it. I'm tired of dealing with it. And so we retreat. And retreating's okay, but my question to you is this: when you retreat, what are you doing? What do you retreat to? When you retreat, are you pulling back so that you can get before God again and go, okay, God, I have lost sight of this thing. Everything feels chaotic. I don't know how to put the pieces together right now. God, would you just speak into my life and remind me and refresh me of what the vision that you have for me is? Or do you just go look for a new puzzle or new pieces that don't even fit into your puzzle? What do you do? Because when we look in Scripture, I mean, if we're going to look to anyone, we should look to Jesus. Look at what did Jesus do when life, like he always had this close relationship with the Father, but even in Jesus' ministry, Jesus would retreat and he would go pray alone. And here's one of the amazing things. Why would Jesus do that? Jesus would go back to the Father, even though he's God, to remind himself of, hey, show me that picture of the box top again, God. Father, would you show me a picture of the box top again? There's this moment where Jesus is having a box top moment, right? It's right before he's going to be crucified. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's already had the Last Supper, which we're getting ready to celebrate communion here in a minute. And he's been with his disciples. They left the upper room where they did that, and then they go to the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus is praying. And in that moment of prayer, Jesus prays these words. He says, Father, if you would, let this cup pass from me. Father, if you would, this piece right here, I don't like that. I don't like this piece of the puzzle. If we could just take that out and you could make this whole thing work together anyway. And that's where you and I get a lot of times when we're struggling, when we're in this waiting game and we can't figure it out. There's certain things that we just, like if I just take this out, maybe it would make it easier. If I remove this part of my life, maybe it would just be easier. Or if I go grab somebody else's puzzle and I grab a piece from theirs and I try to force it in because their puzzle looks fantastic. Everything in their puzzle looks great. Everything in their puzzle, I just wish I had that puzzle because that puzzle looks like an awesome puzzle. So we try to go steal a piece out of their puzzle and put in ours, and it doesn't seem to quite fit, though we wish it would. Jesus says, Father, if you would, let this cup pass from me. But then he says these words, nevertheless, not my will be done, but yours. Not what I want. Not what I can see. This piece right here, Father, if you could just take that away, that would be great. But ultimately, Father, I believe that your plan supersedes my plan. I believe that your plan is better than my plan. And I want to do what you will to do. We often want one thing and simultaneously want something else that's an enemy to the rest of what God wants for us. So here's a question. As our deacons are going to come forward, we're going to partake in communion. How do we know what the box top is? How do we know what God's vision for our life? I mean, God doesn't speak to us like that. I don't know if maybe you have, I don't know. But I doubt any of you have ever had a dream where people's sheaves started bowing down to yours. I don't know. So how do we know what the box top looks like? How do we know what God's plan for our life is so that we can live it out in a way that we can get to a place where we go, God, if you would, let this pass from me, but nevertheless, not my will be done, but yours. How do we know what the end result looks like? How can we have confidence? See, Joseph had confidence in God's plan because he had seen the end. You know what it is for me and you? This is the box top. And you know, when I'm putting a puzzle together, there's so many times that I have to pull the box top back and go, let me see that again. Let me see that again. I need to take one more look at this so I can remember what I'm doing. How you doing on looking at the box top? You looking at it pretty regularly? Because what happens is if you're at a place where you feel stuck and you're at a place where things are difficult and you're at a place where life just doesn't feel like it's making sense, it could very well be that it's because you haven't looked at the box top in a while. And we take this for granted so much. We could get into statistics about the average Christian and how much they read the Bible, and it would embarrass us. How often are we reading this? How often are we looking into God's word? How often are we looking at God's plan? Because when you live this out, life just seems to be more clear. It doesn't mean it's easy. It's a lot clearer. And we know where we're going and we know what we're doing. And the puzzle pieces, even when they don't make sense and even when we get frustrated and we have to pull back, at least we know we can pull back and go, God, help me. God, let me see the picture. God, your will be done. And we can avoid making disasters like Joseph could have made. And most people probably would have said, in Joseph's day, they probably would have said, Joseph, you had every right to. But he would have destroyed the work that God was doing. What about you?